I just wanted to go over some of the soil and NDVI data that was collected with John Santos. I've brought in the raw data from the NDVI sensor and from the soil sled from when Hans and I were out in the vineyard scanning. Plus, I took the soil samples that John collected, called whatever Seneca soil samples, and pulled them into my EV so we can work with them. So let me show you what I did. Okay, so we're in my EV. We're in John's home farm map, and we have some data sets. So I started with NDVI raw data, and there was also the soils data, raw data. And this is the data that comes in right off of the soil sled and the NDVI through the data logger, and we just upload it, and we see the headers, and we're able to color the different soils maps and NDVI maps by header. Okay, so I just went through the process of processing the data like we did in the earlier tutorial and came up with interpolated maps. And then I joined all those interpolated maps and re-uploaded them into my EV. And that is under Breakneck May 2022 soils and NDVI. So all of these are interpolated maps and they've been joined. So they're all in one data file. And we have deep MS, DPC, shallow EC, shallow MS, and NDVI. We can definitely see that there's a variety difference in the NDVI, but there's also these patterns that we see in soil. So this soil EC map is, to me, very similar to the soil EC map that John sent that was done by the guys at UB. So that's good that they're similar because the soil doesn't change that much over time. Okay, so now here's the cool thing, I think, is we have some stratified soil samples that are on top of this, and we want to see, are there relationships between the soils map and the soils that were collected? And can we use, if there's a good enough relationship, can we translate, say, the shallow EC map into a soil pH map or a soil calcium map? And so we do that by going to the data translator. And we want our, not our raw data, we want our processed maps, soil and NDVI. We have the headers that are in that compiled data set, right? Deep MS, DPC, shallow EC, shallow MS, and NDVI. We're going to go with shallow EC because we know from our experience that shallow EC tends to relate a lot to some of our soil chemistry, especially with respect to cations and cation availability to the plants. So calcium, potassium, magnesium. And we want to compare that to the sample, the stratified sample soil locations. And then we have a bunch of headers on that. And that's the analysis that came back from the lab on those soil samples. So calcium, potassium, magnesium, excuse me, cation exchange capacity. And then I think these are percent base saturations that must have come in on the soils test, plus soil pH and organic matter. So we should see stuff like cation exchange capacity should be related to the electrical conductivity in the soil. And if we look at that, so we're comparing shallow EC with CEC, and we see this really nice relationship, as we should. So we could use that. We could translate the EC map into a CEC map or a cation nutrient holding capacity map, which would help drive some of our fertilizer applications if we wanted to do that variable rate. But we could look at anything. We could look at soil pH. You can see the relationship there. We have one outlier, and that one might be this one where a soils was collected where we didn't scan at this time. Let's go with soil pH. Okay, so I see this relationship. I want to translate the shallow EC into a soils pH, a spatial soils pH map. I hit run the translation. And it does it. And I add it to my EV. Added it here. Here's our translated map. Okay, so we're going to go by soil pH. We'll do a, whoops, we'll do it. I'm clicking too fast. Jinx. Let's do 10 zones just to make a pretty map. And maybe we want to put a filter because we got some oddball readings here. We got some oddball points there. We can trim those out to make a nice map. Okay, so now we have a translated, we've translated our electrical conductivity map into a predicted soil pH map. So we can see that, you know, these blue regions have higher soil pH and these red regions have lower soil pH.